All right, we want to now talk about, and remember next week we meet twice. Remember that? We're Monday and Friday, and Hitler is Wednesday. This week we were just Wednesday, and Hitler's Monday and Friday. So that's the way I'd sort of plan the whole semester, but well, there's all those days in there that mess us up. And actually, we're going to be that way except for the week when it's Good Friday week, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. Then we won't. 14th, yes. On the 14th, obviously we won't have a class. So that week we'll just meet one for each class. One day for each. Well, we are up to the final section of the course as far as chronologically. And I want to talk a bit about what happens after the Peloponnesian Wars and the rise of Macedonia. In the time we have left today, which I guess, well, not too bad. Not quite a half an hour, 25 minutes or so. So let me go ahead and begin with this, and we'll finish it up next week, depending on how far we get. One of the things that happens at the end of the Peloponnesian War, there's several things that are there. First of all, of course, Athens is defeated. Spoiler alert, they lose the war. Okay. Yeah, I know. Sorry, I didn't want to wreck it for you. But they do. And that is normally 405, but everything's wrapped up by 405, 404 BC. Then what happens? What happens then, of course, is that Sparta and the Sparta collective, if you will, alliance, has won. And Sparta is the ruler of much of Greece. However, there's a lot of problems all around Greece. They've won the war, but it's a Pyrrhic victory. How's that? Now we're bringing in Roman history into the Greek class. But he's Greek during the Roman period. His name is Pyrrhus, right? You remember Pyrrhus? Some of you in the class last semester, you remember a Pyrrhic victory in English means a hollow victory. You win the battle, but you lose the war. Well, Sparta had won, but the problem was much of Greece that they won was devastated because this war had been going on and off for quite a while. A lot of the farmland had been destroyed. A lot of the infrastructure had been destroyed. And it turns out that Spartans are much better at fighting than they are at administrating. Yeah. And so I'm refraining from saying any kind of jokes about any sort of administration at this point because this is all being recorded. Okay, so now the Spartans were better warriors than administrators. Now, one of the things that happens at this time is they also have to go out and deal with other problems in the area. For example, Asia Minor, as we call it, it has different names. Today we'd call it Turkey. Asia Minor is really, I guess, more of a sort of Roman term for it. But it's that territory which they're having troubles. And the other problem is their old ally, the Corinth, or as they say in Kentucky, Corinth. There's a town called Corinth, Kentucky. Corinth has rebels, and they do not want to be under the thumb of Sparta. So this rebellion will take place around 395 to 397. And this is sometimes called the Corinthian War. Then also we have another rebellion, our old buddies, the Persians. I know many of you are pro-Persian. You're anti-Greek in here. So your buddies, the Persians, then will actually back a rebellion of the city of Thebes. The city of Thebes will then rise in power in the midst of all this turmoil. So we're not going into all the details, but let's just say that while they did win, Sparta did win, what they ended up winning was not well organized, and it wasn't actually in very good shape at this time. So this then brings rise to this Spartan hegemony will end up being supplanted by one of Thebes. Thebes was under the control of the Spartans until 378, when the man here, pictured here in the statue, Epaminondas. Yeah, that's probably not right. Epaminondas. Yeah, he was the leader who will lead them to freedom. And so by 371, Thebes gets their independence from Sparta, but they keep fighting. They take control over Thessaly in 370. And in fact, Thebes is starting to get so strong that alliances form that are anti-Theban, if we can use that term, which brings together old enemies like Athens and Sparta. But Thebes will win the battle, and in the process, their leader dies. So what picture am I painting here? I'm painting a picture of upheaval. We have had a time of civil warfare, Peloponnesian War, where Athens begins this extremely powerful. By the time it ends, after plague and war and so forth, we now see that Athens is greatly weakened, and what Sparta inherits is Greece. The territory they have has a great amount of problems. There's not enough food. The cities are in turmoil, many times much of it destroyed. And we'll see intervention, troubles within, troubles without, and interventionist policies of the Persians will also lead to further, because the Persians have been loving this Peloponnesian War, by the way. I mean, that's the easiest thing that you can do. See, I'm not trying to tell you how to do things, but if for example you have an enemy or a rival, we'll use a less loaded term. If you want to win over your rival or defeat your enemy, you don't always have to do it yourself. It's something to keep in mind. History teaches us that one of the easiest ways to bring down a rival or an enemy is by simply finding someone else to fight your battle for you. And if they're fighting each other, well, that's... So now the Greeks have been fighting each other for quite a while, and the Persians don't want that to stop. Just because Athens is out of the picture, is a powerhouse. Now Sparta, they wouldn't want Sparta to... So they back Thebes, who had been a rival of Sparta all along. So, and we've had this kind of policy in modern times. People find it, when I teach history in the Middle East, they find it sometimes odd that Saddam Hussein was once our ally. Osama bin Laden was once our ally, all right? That we trained them, that we funded them, that we gave them weapons at various times. Because of that principle, my enemy's enemy is my friend. But once that enemy is gone, what happens to my friend, my friendship? Our friendship is usually also gone, and a lot of times it can turn around and come back at you, right? So that's really what's going on here. But during this whole process now, since the areas to the south, Peloponnesus and what we would call the main part of mainland Greece, have had all kinds of problems. But the place that has been, I won't say totally exempt, but has not been affected nearly as much by these wars, has been way up to the north, Macedonia. The area that most Greeks doesn't even really consider to be Greek. We call this period then from let's say roughly around 400, 390 BC, down to the Roman period, which I guess Rome takes over different parts of Greece at different times. Well, let's say to about to the 1st century BC, right? 133, but really sometimes down to like 80. But anyway, so about 300 years of history. We now label it the Hellenistic period. People just broadly call it Hellenistic history, Hellenistic culture, so forth. This was this was invented in modern times. In other words, the people of this time didn't say, "Oh, we're living in a Hellenistic period." As many of the periods of history that we look at, the labels, the categorization comes later, right? Like now, I remember when 9/11 happened, I told my students immediately that the Cold War was over. We were now in the age of terror. I told them that. I said, this is now a new period. The Cold War was over in the 90s. We had this, what people thought might be the stable, it's like the new reality, but really the new reality happened for us in 2001, and the whole world has now changed its focus. Our foreign policy, everything revolves around terrorism, terrorists. So I called it the age of terror. I said this is going to be seen as the turning point. Now, things were happening before that, things happen after that, but that's going to be the point that people say, just like the Berlin Wall comes down, they'll say that's when the Cold War ended. Okay, things happened before that and after that. Anyway, so people didn't call this a Hellenistic period then. Where do we get the name Hellenistic? It comes from the word Hellas, which is just the Greek word that means Greece. So the Greeks did not call Greece Greece. They called it Hellas. And so they take the word Hellas and then they put this ending on it, say it's Greek-like, it's Hellenistic. So it's a modern term to describe the post-classical Greek period. If I had to give a more textbook definition. And it really is, because things are different than the sort of the classical 5th century Greece. Things are very different than the 5th century Greeks. And they're also very different than the Roman period. What do we call this period? Well, we now call it the Hellenistic period. That name's been around probably for, I don't know, I haven't really looked at the history of it, but at least 100 years or so. Maybe a little more. That's what this category has been called. So roughly, we could say from about 400 to 50 BC. Okay, that technically, because even when the Romans do start to come in and start to take some control over parts of Greece, the culture and so forth is still going on. Now, the focus of this time frame, the real, what we've been talking about before, the focus has been mostly Athens and Sparta, right? And a lot of it's been Athens. The focus here is going to move to the north. Macedonia. Macedonia was considered, as I think I've told you in here before, as country bumpkins. There's a term we don't use too often, bumpkin. Country bumpkin, rednecks, hillbillies, all pejorative terms that we assign to people that live in remote areas, right? That we want to be able to collectively dismiss and say, well, they're uneducated, they're backwards, they're out of touch, they're clinging to their religion and guns. I think is what one politician said. I think his name was Barack Obama. Clinging to their religion and guns. Okay, a bunch of redneck hillbilly backwaters. That's the way they thought. People in Athens thought about Macedonia. These people are not really Greeks. Although they speak Greek, I'm sure they had a different accent, right? It's like people in the hills of Kentucky have a little different accent. They sure enough do. And so we see then that they can marginalize them. Yes?
Going back to the Greeks don't call themselves Greeks, they
sure.
call themselves Hellas. Is that kind of like the same principle with Roman? They don't call the Greeks, they call them Gracchus.
Well, yeah, I mean that's the Latin word for Greece would be Gracchi or Gracchus, Magna Graecia would be Greater Greece. That's the southern part of Italy. But this is the Greek, in the Greek language, the word for the land of Greece is not Greek. So really, our English word comes from the Latin. It doesn't come from the Greek word. Otherwise, we wouldn't call them Greeks. We'd call them Hellenes, which is more what the Greeks would call themselves, Hellenes. Anyway, so yeah, it was recognized, obviously, that this is a different period, and it's recognized that different things are happening here, and so they give it this name. Yeah, we got a hand up. He's Googled it.
I found that quote.
Which quote?
By Barack Obama.
Oh, yeah. That was Well, that was just an aside thing. But yes, what you've got a comment now on? Yeah, he's running. Well, yeah, he was talking about Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia.
So they get better than the claim to guns or living in apathy, people who aren't white or anti-immigrant.
Yes. 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 Clinging to their religion and guns. Yes. Well, yeah, that's when he was running for re-election. And, basically just dismissed. I mean, we do this with other groups too. Different people do with different groups. It's a way of dismissing people. You don't have to really deal with them because they're just backwards. They're just uneducated. That's just the way they are. They're never going to change. So I don't have to even consider them. That's the way Athens was with, and I can tell you that living in Kentucky and near West Virginia and so forth, that got a lot of airplay in elections. I don't know if it did elsewhere in the country, but that quote was often highlighted in political commercials, that they cling to their religion and guns, because the people there understood what it meant. It meant that we don't care what you think, and so forth. So yeah. So whether you like that quote or not, it got a lot of airplay in that part of the country because it was negative. It's kind of like when Hillary Clinton said she was going to shut down all the coal industry. That got a lot of airplay in coal country. Okay. Yeah, now we're going to go through all of them, right? Yeah. In a basket of deplorables, I think is what she said she put them in. Yes. So yeah, we can do all the little slogans, but my point here is not to make a commentary about modern politics, but to say that we today do similar things. We can just categorize, like the basket of deplorables, you just categorize people, then you don't really have to deal with it. You just say, well, if you think anything like that or you act anything like this, I just throw you over here in this basket, in this pigeonhole, and then, I'm not going to deal with it. And that's what the ancient Athenians, that's the way they thought. So maybe it is relevant, because it is the way they thought. They were dismissive, and they thought nothing good is going to come out of Macedonia. But even though it was considered to be a backwater, it had a lot of natural resources there. The other thing that it had is that it was spared most of this conflict of the Greek Civil War, if we were going to call it that, the Peloponnesian War, was not fought in Macedonia. It was fought down in Attica. It was fought down around Athens. It was fought in the Peloponnesus. It was not fought there. So they are spared that. And, of course, our country, right, assuming the United States is your country, that's what I'm talking about, the United States, has been spared much warfare. We haven't fought a war here since the Civil War on our own turf. Now, we've been attacked. They attacked Pearl Harbor, December 7th, right? There was an attack on 9/11, 2001. Those are just 2 days, and see how they stand out in the destruction that's there. Imagine if you had a long-term war, like, say, what's happened in Europe. For years, people are fighting. 1939 to 1945, and prior to that, World War I. Just think of the devastation. Well, Macedonia had been spared a lot of that devastation. One of the natural resources they had were silver mines, because there are a lot of hills up there. So there are parallels between Macedonia and, let's say, Appalachia, in my mind, because of the hills, because of the sort of dismissive nature. We do that a lot with people that live in the hills. They're just hill people, hillbillies. We don't have to deal with them. But they found silver. And so silver obviously was valuable. It brought a lot of money into that area. and they were able to begin to reorganize themselves. So Macedonia was a territory sort of unto itself. And it begins to be, the territory is unified into large city-states and then brought into really what we could call a kingdom. One of the highlights or one of the hallmarks of the Hellenistic period is you start to have kingdoms that you did not have in the classical Greek period. All right? You had city-states that were ruled maybe by dictators or tyrants, but you didn't really have people calling themselves kings and have kingdoms. Well, here they do. King Amatus II, 390 to 369. We could credit him. He doesn't get a lot of press in this because a lot more famous ones to come right after him. But he's really the one who unifies Macedonia into a powerhouse. During the same period, there's a lot of fighting down in Thebes and all those other things. He is up there. Not only have they been spared that, but they're now getting themselves organized while everybody else is still down there fighting. In the aftermath of the Peloponnesian War, there's still a lot of conflict. Macedonia spared that as well. He establishes a capital, his capital city at Pella, which will remain the capital of the Macedonian rulers. Pella, which is up in the north. And he reorganizes things. So there he is. There's one of his coins. That's a pretty standard looking Macedonian coin. I actually have at home a coin which has, I have a couple of silver coins, ancient Greek. I don't know where they are now because I moved, but I have them somewhere. I still trust that they're there.
Well, you have until the 21st. So.
I have until the 21st to find it, then I can show you. So I'll see if I can find them. I know what little box that they're in, but I don't know where that little box is. Well, here's our buddy Philip II, more commonly called Philip the Great, because he's going to pick up on what this reorganization has done, and he is going to expand the territory of Macedonia. He comes to power in 369 and usually is known today as Philip the Great. Down below you see a representation of him in gold. The inset with the black background up there is a representation of him that actually was made where you can see above his right eye. Do you see that? Above his right eye, there's a scar. Because Philip was blinded in the right eye by an arrow. He got hit in the eye with an arrow in battle. And so you can actually see it there. They've represented it with that groove. That's a groove made by, I guess, the arrow sliding, the bone, the eye socket. And so he was well trained as a youth, prepared for this. Great military man, general, I guess we'd say, or strategic. He makes changes to the army, which is going to be part of the reason that he can expand their territories through using their infantry and cavalry units in coordination. One of the things he does is he changes some of their formations and some of their weaponry. Most famously, I suppose, is that he lengthened the spears that they would carry in their formation. Made them much longer, and it would sort of depend on where you're standing in the formation, so that it was almost like a porcupine coming at you, right? So in other words, they could have these very long spears, and you're moving sort of like in a phalanx formation, and they're coming at you, say, double time with these things. So you're probably going to get out of their way. Most people would, because you're not going to be able to even get to them with a sword or something, because these things are sticking out. I think I got a picture of that in a second, or at least a drawing. Well, he improves the cavalry units as well. And because of these changes, he is able to expand Macedonian territory along the coast. He moves south into Thessaly. He moves east into Thrace. So if you know where these places are, then I'll show you a map in a moment. So basically he goes to the east and he goes to the south. There's a lot of mountains to the north. He even goes a bit to the west. He goes up to Illyria and so forth. And he expands the territory of the Macedonians greatly, creating a very large territory. Of course, always overshadowed by what his son would accomplish. But the son, is building upon what the father did. There's no doubt about it. Had there not been a Philip the Great, it would have been difficult for Alexander to be so great, right? I'm not saying he would have been great, but it would have been tough. For example, here is just a summary in a visual form. Some people learn in a visual fashion. Other people learn in a textual fashion, and then other people just don't learn. No, everybody learns. So here we see the heart of Macedonia. I like it because it's got the big M. Dial M for Macedonia. That's a great movie. You have to watch it. And there's the capital at Pella. So we see then in Macedonia, this is the heartland then of Macedonia. This is what most people think of when they think of Macedonia. Well, what he's going to do then, at the start of his reign, this is the territory he has, what he's sort of handed after the reorganization of the Macedonian and the unification of sort of Macedonian states into one state. But then this lighter, whatever you call that, orange color, anyway, the lighter shade, you see moving to the east, moving to the south, somewhat even moving to the west. He will begin to add these areas, especially in this lighter orange color, areas that are added by Philip. So he adds, he adds Philippi, Thrace, which is getting you over towards Constantinople here, so it goes across this way, Europe. He goes south to Thessaly, fights battles here. And as far as the islands, you can see his sphere of influence in these islands in the northern part of the Aegean as well. So he's doing all this while basically down here they're still fighting each other. Okay, here's Sparta's territory to the south and so forth. Okay, now of course Alexander is obviously going to expand that. Then we said that he had changed the formation. Here is a drawing that shows us what I was trying to describe to you, and that is these very long spears that can be held out. So if they come at you, and then the ones in the back, they hold up like this. So it's kind of like a porcupine-like thing coming, and it can keep coming at you relentlessly. I think we're out of time. Yeah. So we will end it there for today.